For years, officers Gregory Calloway and Anthony Miller did whatever they wanted. Every traffic stop was a trap, every complaint disappeared. They ruled through fear, knowing no one could touch them until they harassed the wrong man. A black man walking his German Shepherd through a quiet neighborhood, a man they assumed was powerless, just another face they could intimidate. When he didn't submit, when he questioned their authority, they escalated. Harsh words became threats, threats became violence, and when his dog stepped forward, one of them reached for his gun. Now Malcolm Hayes, a Delta Force operative with nothing left to lose, is coming for them. The officers thought they understood power, thought their badges made them untouchable, but they have no idea what's coming. Justice will be swift and painful. The afternoon sun cast long shadows over the quiet suburban street. Rex's paws tapped rhythmically against the concrete, his leash hanging loosely in Malcolm's grip. The German Shepherd moved in perfect sync with his own, alert but relaxed. Malcolm took a slow breath, inhaling the crisp scent of freshly cut grass. This walk was part of his routine, a simple pleasure after long weeks traveling for security work overseas. Now that he was back, he wanted nothing more than to enjoy the little things. Yet even as he savored the moment, he was aware of the eyes. It always happened: a car rolling to a slow stop, the movement of a curtain, a jogger who hesitated before continuing past. Malcolm had spent most of his adult life in high-risk environments where survival depended on reading situations before they unfolded. Here, in the place that was supposed to be home, it was different, subtler, but no less real. He felt it in the way strangers' eyes lingered just a second too long, in the way some clutched their purses tighter. He had done nothing but exist, and still it was enough to make people uneasy. It was ironic. He had spent over a decade in Delta Force, had operated in places where stepping into the wrong alley meant never stepping out. He had taken down warlords, dismantled terrorist cells, protected people who never knew they were in danger. And yet here, in his own neighborhood, the place he had paid for with blood, sweat, and sacrificed, he was the one who didn't belong. A car turned the corner ahead, creeping forward at a pace that felt too deliberate. Malcolm glanced toward it, already knowing what he was about to see. The black and white patrol car. The low humming growl in Rex's chest was so soft that no one else would have heard it. "Easy, boy," Malcolm said, his voice calm. Rex obeyed instantly. The cruiser slowed as it pulled alongside him, matching his pace. Then came the voice, "Afternoon, sir." Malcolm stopped, turning toward the vehicle with measured ease. His posture was relaxed, his expression neutral. "Afternoon, officer." The driver, Officer Calloway, leaned against the open window, his eyes assessing. His partner, Officer Miller, had already stepped out, positioning himself just a few steps away, close enough to intimidate, far enough to claim it wasn't intentional. "You live around here?" Calloway asked. "Yes, sir," Malcolm answered without hesitation. Calloway's lips twitched. "Funny, don't think I've seen you before." "I travel a lot for work, security contracting overseas. Just got back a few days ago." Miller scoffed. "Security contracting? That's some kind of fancy way of saying mercenary." Malcolm let out a soft chuckle. "Not quite. Private security for high-risk environments. I consult for agencies and corporations, help train teams for emergency response." Calloway nodded slowly. "Well, we got a call about someone looking suspicious in the neighborhood. Figured we'd check it out." Malcolm raised a brow. "I wasn't aware walking my dog was suspicious." "You'd be surprised what people think is suspicious these days." Miller took a slow step closer, his eyes dropping to Rex. "That's a big dog. Trained?" "Yes, sir. Obedience, protection. He's very disciplined." "Trained for what?" Malcolm let the question settle. "Obedience, protection. He's very disciplined." Calloway shifted. "We're going to need to see some ID." Malcolm knew his rights. He could ask why, could refuse, could stand his ground. But he also knew exactly what kind of men he was dealing with. Of course, he reached into his jacket slowly, deliberately. Rex let out a barely audible rumble, shifting slightly closer. "Whoa there," Miller muttered, his voice sharper. "You might want to keep that thing under control." Malcolm's jaw tightened. "Rex is fine. He's well trained." Calloway chuckled. "Yeah, we'll see about that." Something about the way he said it made Malcolm's stomach tighten. He pulled his wallet out carefully. Calloway barely glanced at it before waving dismissively. "Nah, I think we're going to need you to step over here for a second. Just a few questions." Malcolm exhaled slowly. Don't give them an excuse. He gave Rex's leash the lightest tug, then stepped forward. And that was when everything changed. Malcolm stepped forward, his wallet held out. Rex's leash remained steady in his grip, but the dog's body had tensed an imperceptible shift. Only Malcolm noticed. Miller took the wallet with lazy arrogance, flipping it open. "Oh, look at that. We got ourselves a real-life soldier." Calloway took the wallet, glancing at it with an unimpressed expression. "Delta Force, huh? That's supposed to mean something." Malcolm didn't react. "It means I've served. And now I work in security consulting." Calloway let out a small chuckle, handing the wallet back in a way that forced Malcolm to step closer. "That's so. Because what I see is a guy walking around a neighborhood where people don't seem to recognize him. Folks around here get nervous when they see someone they don't think belongs." Malcolm tilted his head slightly. I do belong. I live here. Calloway folded his arms. Then you won't mind answering a few more questions? I believe I already have. Miller scoffed. I don't know, Calloway. Something about his attitude don't sit right with me. Guy seems a little tense, yet almost like he's got something to hide. Malcolm took a slow breath, centering himself. He had been in more hostile situations than he could count, had faced warlords and insurgents. Yet here, in his own country, he wasn't seen as a man who had served. He was a threat, and Rex knew it. The dog's ears were up, his gaze locked on the officers, his body language shifting from relaxed to alert. Calloway noticed. You got that thing under control. He's fine. He's trained. Yeah, trained for what? Protection. Security. He follows commands. Calloway let out a low whistle. A dog like that, all trained up to attack. Dangerous thing to be walking around with. He's not trained to attack. He's trained to defend, yeah? And what exactly does he think you need defending from, huh? The words sat between them, heavy with meaning. Miller exhaled. I don't know, Calloway. Guy's got a big dog, won't answer questions. Seems real on edge. He took another step forward. I think maybe we need to bring him in, just to be safe. Malcolm could feel Rex's tension spiking. You don't need to do that. I've cooperated. I've shown my ID. There's no cause to detain me. Miller shrugged. Maybe, but see, I just don't like the way this is going. I think we're going to need you to turn around. Put your hands behind your back, Calloway said. Just for our safety, I haven't done anything yet. Then you won't mind. It was a test, a deliberate provocation. Then Miller reached out, his hand on Malcolm's wrist for insistent. Rex's snarl cut through the air like a blade. Instantly, both officers' hands went to their weapons. Malcolm moved without thinking, redirecting Miller's grip, stepping back as he held Rex's leash firm. Whoa, 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 he said quickly. He's reacting to your aggression. Stand down. But they weren't listening. Miller had already drawn his gun, his face twisted. Get that dog back. Control your damn dog. Calloway barked. Rex was still in place, but his entire body was taut. His eyes locked on the men who now posed a clear danger to his handler. Malcolm raised his hands slowly. Listen, officers. I live here. You saw my ID. There's no issue. Rex remained still, but Malcolm could feel the leash tightening. The dog sensed everything, every inch of unease, every note of tension. Control your damn dog, Miller snapped. Malcolm exhaled slowly. Rex is under control. He hasn't moved. He's on a leash. He's trained. The only reason he's reacting is because you. I don't give a damn what you think, boy, Miller snapped. I said control your damn dog. Malcolm's fingers twitched. Officers, please. I am complying. You saw my ID. My dog is restrained. I am not resisting. So tell me, what exactly do you need from me? Calloway took a step closer. You think this is a game? I don't care who you are, where you live, or what you do. Right now, you're a threat. And that mutt of yours. A damn liability. Miller moved forward. You want to keep talking, or you want to do what the hell you're told? Rex let out a low warning growl. Malcolm shifted slightly. You're escalating this situation. I am standing still. My dog is standing still. The only aggression here is coming from you. Stand down. Now, Miller barked. Malcolm's heart pounded, not in fear, but in frustration. There was nothing he could say, no amount of reason that would shift the path they had chosen. Calloway gestured aggressively. Put that mutt down. Make him sit now. Malcolm kept his movements slow. He turned his head slightly, giving a quiet command. Rex, down immediately. Rex lowered himself to the ground, his body stiff but obedient. Miller scoffed. Oh, now you want to listen. Calloway wasn't satisfied. Leash, shorten it. Make sure he can't move. Malcolm's jaw clenched, but he obeyed, gripping the leash closer. Calloway exchanged a glance with Miller. Something silent passed between them. We're done playing around, Miller said. Turn around. Hands behind your back. Malcolm stiffened. I've done nothing wrong, yeah? And yet here we are. Malcolm didn't move. He knew what would happen if he turned around the moment he gave them his back. He'd be in cuffs. Turn around, Miller ordered again. Taking a step forward, Rex let out a deep, rolling growl. Both officers' hands shot to their guns. Control your damn dog, Miller shouted. Malcolm's voice snapped, sharp and authoritative. He is controlled. Not good enough, Calloway yelled back. Malcolm felt the shift the moment before the moment. The air seemed to still. Miller moved first. His hand jerked toward his gun. Rex reacted before Malcolm could even process the movement. A defensive instinct. A split-second reaction. A single bark, sharp and quick. A warning. Then the shift of muscle as Rex tensed. Malcolm barely had time to process before it happened. The gunshot rang out, splitting through the air like thunder. The leash jerked in Malcolm's hand. Then Rex stumbled. The world slowed. The sound of blood roaring in Malcolm's ears drowned out everything else. The officer's shouts, the distant noise of a car engine, the voices of unseen neighbors. All he saw was Rex's body jerking back, the shock in his dark brown eyes, the way his legs faltered beneath him. No, Malcolm's voice didn't even sound like his own. His knees hit the pavement before he realized he had moved. Rex collapsed against him, his weight heavy to heavy. Malcolm's hands were suddenly slick with warmth, with life slipping away far too fast. A low, pained whimper escaped from Rex's throat, his breathing shallow and uneven. Miller still had his gun raised, his face a twisted mask of self-satisfaction. Calloway simply shook his head. Told you he was a liability. Malcolm barely heard them. Everything inside him went still. Stay with me, Malcolm whispered, his voice raw. I got you, boy. Stay with me, please. Rex's eyes were still on him, still alert, still searching his face as if waiting for a command. But there was no battlefield, no mission, no threat to eliminate. Just pain, just confusion, just the deep unspoken bond between them, unraveling too fast. Malcolm could feel the tremors racking through Rex's body, the rapid rise and fall of his chest, the small strangled sounds escaping his throat. You're okay. You're okay, Malcolm muttered, his hands shaking as he stroked Rex's head. You're strong, buddy. Just hold on. Just damn it, Rex, don't you quit on me. The officers were talking, but they didn't matter. Their voices were nothing but distant noise. Then Rex let out a final, shallow exhale, and his body went still. Something inside Malcolm snapped. He lifted his head, eyes burning, blood smeared across his hands. His breathing hitched, then turned to something deeper, rougher, jagged with fury. You. His voice was a growl, a threat. He surged upward, pushing away from Rex's still body. You killed him. Miller flinched, but Calloway just sneered. That's on you, big guy. Should have controlled your damn dog. The world turned red. Malcolm lunged, not thinking, not planning, just moving, just giving in to the raw, vicious fury, tearing through every inch of him. The sharp, brutal snap of electricity slammed into his spine. His entire body seized, muscles locking, nerves igniting in blinding pain as the taser voltage ripped through him. He crashed back to the ground, his body convulsing, unable to move, unable to do anything but feel. Then they were on him, boots pressing against his arms, against his back, pistols leveled at his head, voices shouting, demanding, barking orders. Stay down, don't you move, hands behind your back, now. Malcolm gasped, choking on his own breath, rage and grief crashing into his chest. Every part of him screamed to fight back, but they had guns. They had already killed Rex, and if he moved again, they'd do the same to him. His body trembled, but he forced his arms behind his back, his fists clenching so tightly his nails dug into his own palms. The weight of a knee pressed between his shoulder blades, grinding him down. Yeah, that's right, Calloway muttered. That's where you belong. Malcolm let out a raw, guttural scream. You killed him. You murdered him. But no one listened. Calloway yanked him up by his arms, the metal of the cuffs biting into his wrists. Miller holstered his weapon, watching with something between amusement and indifference. Malcolm was dragged toward the squad car, his body still trembling with unspent rage. He fought against it, against the hands shoving him forward, against the unbearable reality that Rex was gone. But the metal door slammed shut behind him, and he was trapped alone. And then, slowly, something else settled in. Something colder, something sharper, something that felt like steel locking into place. They thought this was over. They thought they had won. But Malcolm wasn't just some man on a walk with his dog. He was Delta Force. And one way or another, he was going to burn their world to the ground. The cold steel of the handcuffs dug into Malcolm's wrists as the cruiser rumbled down the road. His chest still heaved, his pulse a war drum. His fingers twitched against the unforgiving metal, muscles still spasming from the taser. His jaw ached from clenching his teeth. His throat was raw from screams they had ignored. Yet through it all, one image wouldn't leave him. Rex's eyes, filled with loyalty and trust, looking at him in those final moments, waiting for him to fix it. He had never felt so powerless. The cruiser stopped. The doors swung open. Calloway's hand wrapped around his arm, yanking him forward. Welcome to your new home for the night, Miller drawled, shoving Malcolm toward the station doors. Try not to get too comfortable. Malcolm didn't respond. He kept his posture straight, his eyes forward, his mind calculating. The booking process was a blur. Fingerprints, photos, forms. His mugshot was taken with Rex's blood still on his clothes. They led him to a holding cell. Malcolm didn't sit. He didn't pace. He waited. Time blurred. Then the door opened. Get your damn hands off of him, Jasmine. Malcolm exhaled slowly as his sister stormed in, her heels striking the tile like gunfire. She was dressed in full defense mode power suit, sharp angles, a glare that could slice through bone. You're done holding him, she snapped, shoving papers into an officer's chest. Unless you want the lawsuit of the century, I suggest you let him walk out of here. Calloway appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. Relax, sweetheart. We were just having a conversation with your brother. Had a little misunderstanding earlier. Jasmine turned so fast her hair barely caught up. A misunderstanding? Is that what we're calling it now? Miller leaned against the doorway, grinning. He got aggressive, ma'am. We had to make sure things didn't escalate. Jasmine's laugh was sharp, humorless. You mean you shot his dog, assaulted him, and threw him in a cell because you thought he looked out of place in his own neighborhood? Calloway shrugged. Could have gone worse. The temperature in the room dropped. Malcolm finally spoke, his voice quieter than it had been all night, but laced with something that made even Calloway's smirk flicker. It will. For the first time, the officers hesitated. Then Calloway snorted. Take him home, counselor, but I'd tell him to keep his head down. This city isn't too kind to troublemakers. Jasmine's eyes burned, but she didn't respond. Instead, she turned to Malcolm, her fingers wrapping around his wrist firm steady. Let's go. Malcolm followed her out, past the other officers, past the walls that had already erased him, past the men who believed they had won. The night air hit his skin, but it didn't feel freeing. Jasmine exhaled, rubbing a hand over her face before turning to him. I'm sorry, I know what he meant to you. Malcolm's jaw tensed, but he didn't respond. You need to let me handle this, Jasmine continued. You need to let me take this through the courts, through the media, through every legal avenue we have. Do not. It won't work, Malcolm said quietly. Jasmine hesitated. Malcolm, it won't work. And they both knew it. The police owned the system. They controlled the narrative. They had already set it in motion, already buried any chance of accountability. The courts wouldn't save him. The law wouldn't save him. Justice wasn't coming, not the kind Jasmine was hoping for. And so Malcolm did something he hadn't done in years. He let go of the idea that the system would protect him, and he let something else settle in. Something colder. Something inevitable. Days later, the house was silent. Not peaceful absence, the kind of silence that clawed at the edges of a man's mind. Malcolm sat at his kitchen table, staring at his hands. Rex's leash sat coiled on the counter. The absence of weight at his side left a void so deep it felt like the floor would give way. Jasmine stood by the window. You haven't slept. Malcolm didn't answer. You haven't eaten either. Still no response. I know what you're thinking. That made him exhale a slow, humorless sound. He finally looked up. Do you? Jasmine hesitated, something unreadable flickering across her face. I know you. I know how you operate. I know that if something doesn't make sense, if something is broken, you fix it. If there's an enemy, you eliminate it. That's why you were so good at what you did. Her voice softened. But this isn't a battlefield, Malcolm. His jaw clenched. Feels like one. She exhaled, stepping closer. Listen to me. The system is slow, but that doesn't mean it's useless. We're filing a case. I have connections, reporters, activists, watchdogs. This isn't going to just go away. People will hear about what happened. The pressure will build. They'll have to act. Malcolm's gaze didn't waver. No, they won't. Yes, they will. It takes time, but it works. They already closed the internal investigation. Jasmine's breath hitched. What? They wrapped it up this morning. No misconduct. No disciplinary action. No charges. Justified force. Jasmine's entire body tensed. She cut herself off, pacing toward the window. Of course they did. Of course they. She turned back, her voice sharp. That doesn't mean we're done. We can appeal. We can take this higher. We can. No, Jasmine. She shook her head. No, you don't get to say that. Not after what they did. Not after what they took from you. This isn't over. Malcolm leaned forward. They took everything from me in a matter of seconds. But you're telling me to wait, to hope that the same system that let them walk free will suddenly find accountability it's never had before. You're telling me that if I sit still, if I trust the process, maybe in 6 months or a year there might be a hearing, a slap on the wrist, a forced resignation. Maybe. But Jasmine, you and I both know exactly how this plays out. Her throat bobbed. We have to at least try. I did try, he said quietly. I tried the moment they put me in cuffs. I tried when I told them I lived here. I tried when I showed them my ID. I tried when I stood still, when I spoke politely, when I didn't resist, when I begged them to see me as human. I tried, Jasmine. His voice faltered slightly. And Rex still died. And I still went to jail. Jasmine clenched her jaw, her eyes shining with something between frustration and sorrow. Malcolm leaned back. I'm done trying. She stepped forward, lowering herself into the chair across from him. What are you saying? Malcolm tilted his head slightly. I think you already know. Her fingers gripped the edge of the table. Malcolm, I'm not asking you to be okay with it, he cut in. I'm just telling you where I stand, and where this is going. Jasmine's breath trembled. If you do this, there's no coming back. Malcolm held her gaze. I don't want to come back. A silence stretched between them. Finally, Jasmine exhaled, standing and smoothing out her jacket. I'll call you tomorrow. Malcolm nodded. She hesitated, her fingers twitching at her sides as if she wanted to reach out, to grab him, to shake him, to pull him back. But instead, she turned and walked out. Malcolm waited until the sound of her car engine faded before he rose. He moved toward the counter, his hands hovering over Rex's leash. His fingers brushed over the worn leather, tracing the familiar feel of it. Then slowly, deliberately, he picked it up and coiled it tightly in his palm. Not as a leash, not as something that would ever be used again for what it was meant for, but as a reminder, a promise a war was coming and Malcolm was ready. The bar sat at the edge of the city, far from the well-lit streets where Calloway's uniform still carried weight. Here, nobody cared that he was a cop. Here, he could be exactly the kind of man he had always been. Please, arrogant, unafraid. Malcolm had been watching him for days, learning the rhythm of his vices, the way he drifted into the same seat at the bar like clockwork, the way he leaned too close to women who weren't his wife, the way he tossed back whiskey like water. He had no idea he was being hunted. Malcolm sat in the corner, hood low, his drink untouched, as he watched Calloway stumble through another night. The man was predictable, and predictability was a weakness. He had parked in the same alley behind the bar, the one with no security cameras, no street, the perfect place for a man to disappear for a few minutes. Malcolm was going to make sure. Calloway disappeared just long enough for his world to start crumbling. Calloway laughed loudly, slapping the bartender's back. He swayed slightly, his balance compromised. His words were slurred but confident, like a man who believed nothing bad could ever happen to him. Malcolm exhaled slowly, finishing his drink before rising. He let Calloway move first, let him feel the false sense of security. Calloway didn't even glance around as he stumbled toward the back exit, pushing through the door into the dark alley. The moment the door swung shut, the game began. Malcolm followed, silent as a shadow. His breath was steady, his pulse slow, his muscles coiled. Calloway fumbled with his keys, cursing as they slipped from his fingers and clattered against the pavement. He grunted, leaning forward. Malcolm struck. A hard, precise kick to the ribs sent Calloway crashing to the ground, his head bouncing against the pavement with a sickening crack. The man let out a sharp gasp, his hands scrambling against the concrete. Whether Malcolm didn't let him finish, a steel-toed boot slammed into his stomach, knocking the air from his lungs. There was no hesitation, no wasted motion, no mercy. Malcolm grabbed Calloway by the collar, dragging him up just to slam him back down, the back of his skull bouncing off the asphalt, leaving him dazed. Calloway groaned, his body limp, his fingers clawing at Malcolm's arms. Malcolm grabbed a fistful of his hair and yanked his head back, bringing his mouth close to the man's ear. "You don't get to know who I am," he murmured. "Not yet." Calloway shuddered. Malcolm released him, letting him drop hard against the pavement. He stood over him, watching as the man tried to move, tried to make sense of what was happening. It was useless. Malcolm crouched down. "You like to play judge, jury, and executioner, don't you? It's easy when you've got a badge. Easy when you've got a system that protects you, when no one ever fights back." Calloway sucked in a sharp breath. "You're dead. You hear me? You don't." The next punch was swift, calculated, sending blood splattering across the pavement. "That was for all my black brothers and sisters you've harassed and beat," Malcolm said. Calloway choked, spitting red onto the ground. Malcolm let the silence stretch. "This is the last time you ever walk away from something like this. Because after tonight, I'm going to take everything from you. Your job, your reputation, your family, your safety. And when there's nothing left, you'll wake up every day knowing that somewhere out there, I'm watching you." Calloway let out a choked, ragged breath. Malcolm leaned in. "This is just the beginning." And then, just as suddenly as he had appeared, he was gone. Calloway remained on the ground, bleeding, shaking, his heart pounding with a terror he had never felt before. For the first time in his life, he was the one being hunted. Days later, Malcolm had expected them to retaliate. What interested him was how they would respond. They had spent years preying on the weak, operating under the illusion that their authority was absolute. Now, stripped of their security, forced to reckon with the reality that they were being hunted, they had no idea where to begin, so they did what men like them always did. They found someone else to blame. Malcolm sat in his car across the street, his camera lens trained on Calloway and Miller as they moved with a kind of aggression that only came from fear. They weren't handling this like an investigation. This was retaliation. Calloway was still limping, a bruise creeping from beneath his collar. But it wasn't just the beating that had broken him, it was the unknown. He had been attacked in a way he had never experienced before, helpless and powerless, and that had shaken him deeper than any bruise. They stopped outside a rundown boxing gym. Malcolm's eyes flicked toward the entrance as the door swung open, revealing Turn Brigstall, built like a linebacker. He was a well-known figure in the community, a former amateur fighter turned youth mentor, one of the few men who had always stood up against officers like Calloway and Miller. Malcolm remembered reading about the time. Briggs had filed excessive force complaints against them 2 years ago. The charges had been dismissed as resisting arrest, but Malcolm had seen the photos, the bruises, the split eyebrow, the raw abrasions on his wrists. And now Calloway and Miller were back, staring him down. Malcolm lifted his camera, zooming in. The conversation was tense from the start. Calloway stood too close, his arms crossed. Miller kept shifting his weight, glancing at the street like he expected someone to be watching. Briggs wasn't intimidated. He leaned against the doorframe, his expression unimpressed as Calloway spoke. Malcolm couldn't hear them, but he didn't need to. The body language told him everything. Calloway was demanding something. Briggs shook his head, then smirked, saying something that made Miller step forward. Briggs pushed off the doorframe, standing taller, making it clear he wasn't backing down. Miller took another step, but Calloway put a hand on his chest, stopping him. He turned back to Briggs, his expression darkening. Warning. Briggs didn't flinch. He just laughed. Calloway's hands clenched at his sides, but he said nothing else. He turned, motioning for Miller to follow. They left without another word. Malcolm exhaled, lowering the camera slightly. So that was their plan. They had no leads, so they were going to find the strongest black men in the community and shake them down, waiting to see who flinched. Cowards. Malcolm watched as Briggs shook his head before heading back inside. Calloway and Miller, however, weren't finished. They got into their car, and Malcolm tailed them. The next stop was Dwayne Carter's apartment. Malcolm knew that Nam Carter had been another victim, pulled over on a bogus traffic stop 6 months ago, dragged out of his car, accused of having a weapon that never existed. He had been arrested, beaten in the holding cell, charged with assaulting an officer. Malcolm sat in silence, watching as Calloway and Miller approached the front door, knocking hard enough to rattle the frame. The door opened, and Carter appeared, rubbing his eyes. They didn't waste time. Calloway shoved the door open, stepping inside uninvited. Miller entered behind him, blocking the exit. Malcolm adjusted his camera, zooming in through the window. They were interrogating him. Calloway pointed at Carter's arms, his physique, his posture profiling him in real time. Carter's jaw clenched. Then he laughed. Calloway's face darkened. Miller took a step forward. Malcolm took a deep breath, steadying his hands. He didn't need to intervene, not yet. This wasn't about stopping them in the moment. This was about documenting everything. They were digging their own graves, and Malcolm was going to bury them. Malcolm had followed them long enough to know their methods. Their fear had turned to desperation, and desperation made them reckless. They attacked blindly, hoping to hit something. Malcolm knew what was coming before they did. When targeting men like Briggs and Carter didn't get them answers, they would switch tactics. They would look for someone else, someone like him. He saw it in the way Miller hesitated before turning onto a familiar street, in the way Calloway leaned forward as the house came into view. They thought they were being subtle, but Malcolm had been waiting for this moment. He had been preparing. They were coming for him, and they had no idea that he wanted them to. Malcolm had spent 2 nights preparing the house, not obvious security measures that would make them suspicious. Instead, he had staged it to make him look vulnerable. A half-full whiskey bottle left visible on the coffee table, unopened mail stacked on the kitchen counter, a gun safe carefully left slightly ajar. The cameras had been positioned perfectly hidden in plain sight, in places no cop would ever think to check. The front porch light was left on. The side gate was unlocked. An invitation. Malcolm sat in,